In the sterile corridors of the Galactic Union's Advanced Predator Care and Control Center on planet Arcthera, silence reigned supreme. The facility's white walls seemed to absorb sound as effectively as they reflected light, creating an atmosphere of clinical detachment. It was year 4275 CE, over 4 millennia since the establishment of the species classification system that had become the cornerstone of interplanetary research and security protocols. Lyra Thorne moved with practiced efficiency through the Level 7 security checkpoint. Her Xenology Communication Specialist credentials hung from a lanyard around her neck, swinging slightly with each step. At 34, Lyra had carved out a modest reputation in interplanetary research circles, though many still regarded her theories about apex communication as fringe science at best. Biometric scan complete. Welcome back, Specialist Thorne, the automated system announced as she passed through the neural field scanner. The facility housed the galaxy's most dangerous creatures across multiple containment zones, each separated by force fields and specialized neural inhibitors designed to suppress aggressive tendencies. Today's routine inspection would take her to Level 9, where the most lethal specimens were kept under maximum security protocols. Morning, Korhan. Lyra nodded to the security chief as she signed the digital clearance form. Major Corrin glanced up from his monitoring station, his expression characteristically stern. Specialist Thorne, Level 9 inspection today? Yes. The quarterly assessment of Vorathar's containment protocols? Something flickered across Corrin's face. Concern. Perhaps. The Ruinclaw has been showing unusual brainwave patterns this week. Dr. Vornix authorized increased neural suppressants yesterday. Lyra frowned. Increased suppressants? That wasn't in the morning briefing. Last-minute decision. The creature was becoming more responsive to external stimuli. Responsive doesn't necessarily mean dangerous, Lyra countered, unable to keep the edge from her voice. This was typical of Dr. Vornix's approach. Preemptive suppression at the first sign of heightened awareness. Korhan's expression hardened. Dr. Vornix's orders stand. Specialist, just proceed with caution. Lyra nodded curtly and continued toward the Level 9 access point, her mind racing. Vorathar the Ruinclaw was a legend among xenobiologists, the last of a species from the outer reaches of the Void Nebula, captured after a devastating attack on a mining colony that had left 17 dead. The creature was massive, with neural capabilities that defied classification. For 3 years, it had been subjected to increasingly restrictive containment measures as researchers attempted to understand its biology and behavior. The final security door hissed open after her retinal scan cleared. The observation chamber beyond was dimly lit, dominated by a massive containment field that hummed with energy. Inside, barely visible through the shimmer of the force field, lay Vorathar. Lyra approached the control console, her trained eyes quickly scanning the readouts. Heart rate decreased by 30% since last week. Respiratory function diminished. Neural activity erratic. "What have they done to you?" she whispered, fingers tracing the declining vital signs. The monitoring system chirped a warning. Containment field integrity at 97%. Neural suppression at maximum capacity. Something was wrong. These readings weren't consistent with increased aggression. They indicated a creature in distress, possibly dying. Lyra hesitated only briefly before overriding the standard protocol. She activated the secondary containment field, a backup that would maintain security even if she lowered the primary barrier. Then, with a deep breath, she reduced the neural suppressant levels by 15%, enough to allow the creature more awareness without risking a surge of aggression. Authorized reduction of neural suppressants. Security Protocol Theta-3 activated. She spoke clearly for the facility's recording system. This is Specialist Lyra Thorne conducting emergency assessment of Subject V01. The inner field dimmed slightly as the suppressants decreased. Through the clearer barrier, Lyra could now see Vorathar more distinctly. The creature's massive form was curled inward, its crystalline scales dulled from their once vibrant azure to a sickly gray. 6 limbs, each ending in formidable talons that could shred titanium plating, lay limp against the chamber floor. Most alarming was the creature's breathing, shallow and irregular, with long pauses between each labored intake. Lyra's training told her to maintain distance, to observe and record. But something deeper, an instinct she couldn't explain, pulled her toward the emergency field access. Before she could reconsider, she had initiated the sequence that would allow her to enter the outer section of the containment area. Warning: authorized personnel only beyond this point. Full biological containment suit required, the system announced. Lyra quickly donned the protective gear from the emergency station. The suit sealed around her with a soft hiss, its sensors connecting to the facility's monitoring system. She knew this was irregular, borderline insubordination, but the declining vital signs left little time for bureaucratic approval processes. The access door slid open, allowing her into the space between the primary and secondary containment fields. She was now separated from Vorithar by only a single energy barrier, thin enough that she could almost feel the creature's presence through it. "I'm going to lower the inner field to conduct a direct assessment," she announced, though she knew the action would trigger alerts throughout the facility. Maintaining secondary containment at full strength. With a command from her wrist panel, the inner field dissipated. The air changed immediately, warmer, charged with a strange electricity that made the hairs on her arms stand up despite the protective suit. Vorithar's massive head twitched slightly, one enormous eye opening to reveal a pupil that contracted in the changed light. Lyra moved forward cautiously, medical scanner in hand. The readings were even more alarming up close. Cellular degradation, organ failure beginning in multiple systems. This wasn't aggression the creature had been displaying. It was the final struggle against death. "You're dying," she whispered, the realization hitting her with unexpected force. The creature's eye focused on her, its gaze surprisingly lucid, despite the neural suppressants still in its system. A low, rumbling sound vibrated through the chamber, not the threatening growl documented in the facility's records, but something softer, almost like a sigh. Before she could stop herself, Lyra reached out, placing a gloved hand on the creature's scaled hide. The surface was cooler than it should have been, the once smooth plates rough with degradation. What happened next defied all protocols and predictions. Vorithar, a creature that had never shown anything but aggression toward human handlers, slowly shifted its massive body, curling slightly toward Lyra's touch. The movement was weak but deliberate, and as the creature's head came to rest closer to her, Lyra found herself kneeling beside it. The security alarms began blaring, red lights flashing throughout the chamber. She knew reinforcements would arrive within minutes, but she couldn't pull away, not when she was witnessing something that contradicted years of research on apex predator behavior. "I hear you," she said softly, placing her other hand on the creature's head. "I'm listening." Vorithar's eye remained fixed on her, and another sound emerged, a complex series of clicks and rumbles that didn't match any of the vocalizations in the research records. Lyra leaned closer, straining to understand the pattern. The chamber door burst open as security personnel flooded in, weapons raised. Major Corin led the team, his face a mask of shock when he registered the scene before him. Lyra Thorne, kneeling beside the galaxy's most dangerous captive predator, her arms now cradling its massive head as it produced sounds no one had documented before. "Specialist Thorne, step away immediately!" Corin shouted, his voice tight with tension. "He's dying," Lyra called back, not moving from her position. "And he's trying to communicate. Lower your weapons. You're agitating him." "This is a direct violation of security protocols," Corhan began, but was interrupted by another voice from the doorway. "What in all hells is happening here?" Dr. Vornix demanded, his tall, angular frame vibrating with anger as he pushed past the security team. The head of xenomorph ecology stopped short at the sight before him. "Thorne, have you lost your mind?" "Look at the readings, Doctor," Lyra said, gesturing toward the monitoring station with her chin while maintaining contact with Vorithar. "Cellular breakdown across all systems. The increased suppressants accelerated organ failure." Vornix's eyes darted to the screens, his expression shifting from anger to confusion as he processed the data. "That's impossible. The suppressants are specifically calibrated to subdue." "Yes," Lyra interrupted. "But this species has unique neural pathways we've never fully mapped. The suppressants didn't just inhibit aggression, they shut down vital functions." As if to confirm her assessment, Vorithar emitted another series of sounds, more urgent now, but still controlled, still patterned. The creature's massive talons twitched, but made no move to strike. "Listen," Lyra urged. "That's not random vocalization. There's structure there, repetition, rhythm. It's language." "Absurd," Vornix scoffed, though with less conviction than before. "Apex predators don't possess language centers sophisticated enough for—" "With respect, Doctor, we've never allowed one to speak before," Lyra countered. "We've kept them perpetually sedated, their neural functions suppressed. What if we've been wrong all this time?" The monitoring system chimed again, more urgently. "Warning, subject vital signs critical. Systemic failure imminent." Vorithar's breathing had become more labored, the pauses between each breath lengthening. Yet the creature continued to produce sounds, its eye never leaving Lyra's face. "I need recording equipment," Lyra demanded. "And I need the neural suppressants reduced further, just enough to let him communicate clearly before—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Absolutely not," Vornix began, but Korhan, surprisingly, interrupted. "Doctor, with all due respect, the creature is dying. What security risk could it possibly pose now?" Vornix glared at the security chief, then at the assembled team, who seemed equally uncertain. Finally, he exhaled sharply. "Fine. Reduce suppressants by another 10%, but maintain the secondary containment field at maximum strength, and get that recording equipment in here." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. As the neural suppressants decreased, Vorithar's vocalizations became more complex, more deliberate. Lyra remained by the creature's side, speaking softly to it, occasionally responding to its sounds with similar vocalizations of her own. An intuitive attempt at communication that drew skeptical looks from Vornix, but fascinated attention from the research team that had assembled outside the containment area. Professor Rosalind Vega, the facility's neural communication specialist, arrived with specialized equipment designed to analyze and potentially translate non-human vocalizations. She worked feverishly to establish parameters based on the sounds Vorithar was producing. "There's definitely structure here," Vega confirmed after 30 minutes of recording. "Recurring patterns that correspond to specific stimuli. When you mention pain, there's a consistent vocal response. Same with fear and home." "This isn't random, Dr. Vornix. This is communication." Vornix paced at the edge of the containment area, his scientific worldview visibly crumbling in the face of mounting evidence. "Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that these creatures are dangerous. Vorithar alone was responsible for 17 deaths." "Was he?" Lyra looked up from her position beside the dying creature. "We've only ever had the mining company's report. We never investigated from the Predator's perspective." "Because Predators don't have perspectives," Vornix snapped. "They have instincts, drives, territorial imperatives." "Doctor," Vega interrupted, her voice tense with excitement. I think I'm getting something." All eyes turned to the neural communication specialist as she adjusted her equipment. "There's a pattern emerging when we filter the vocalizations through the ultra-low frequency range. It's remarkably similar to galactic standard syntax." "That's impossible," Vornix whispered, but moved closer despite his skepticism. Vega manipulated the controls, and a rough translation appeared on her screen. Not enemy. Protect. Minor's danger. No choice. The room fell silent. Vorathar's eye remained fixed on Lyra, who felt a chill run through her body that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. "Ask him," she said softly to Vega. "Ask what happened at the mining colony." Vega hesitated, then adjusted her equipment to reverse the process, translating galactic standard into frequencies Vorathar might understand. The resulting sounds filled the chamber, harsh and mechanical compared to the creature's organic vocalizations. Vorathar's reaction was immediate. Its massive body tensed, and for the first time since Lyra had entered the containment area, the creature showed signs of distress. A series of urgent sounds followed, so rapid that the translation system struggled to keep up. "Miners dig. Break seal. Ancient danger. Tried warning. No listen. Had to stop." The translation was crude, fragmented, but the meaning was unmistakable. "He was trying to prevent some kind of catastrophe," Lyra breathed. "Something the miners were about to uncover." "Convenient explanation," Vornix muttered, but his usual certainty had abandoned him. Major Corin stepped forward, his security training giving way to genuine curiosity. "Ask about the ancient danger. What was it?" Vega transmitted the question. Vorathar's response came slower now, the creature's strength visibly fading. "Sleeping ones, world eaters, kept contained, for eons." The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. If Vorathar was telling the truth, if the miners had been about to release something even more dangerous, then the attack that had labeled this creature a mindless killer had actually been an attempt to save countless lives. The monitoring system chirped again, more urgently. "Critical alert. Subject vital signs failing. Terminal decline detected." Lyra felt Vorathar's body shudder beneath her hands. The creature's breathing had become shallow, irregular gasps. "He's going," she said, her voice breaking. "There's so much more we need to ask, to understand." Vornix stood frozen, his scientific mind visibly grappling with the paradigm shift occurring before him. Finally, he stepped forward to the edge of the containment field. Ask if there are others like him, who could communicate." Vega quickly translated the question. Vorathar's response was weaker, but clear enough for the system to capture. "All can speak if you listen." The simple statement seemed to echo in the chamber long after the translation appeared. Vorathar's massive eye began to close, the pupil dilating as the creature's systems shut down. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. With what must have been its last reserves of strength, Vorathar shifted its massive head, the neural control mask that had been permanently affixed to its skull since capture, a device designed to prevent the creature from accessing its full neural capacity, began to crack. The sophisticated technology, designed to withstand the pressure of 6 atmospheres, simply disintegrated as Vorathar exerted a previously unknown form of neural energy. Alarms blared throughout the facility. The security team raised their weapons again, but Lyra didn't move from her position. She knew, somehow, that this wasn't an attack. Freed from the neural mask, Vorathar's eyes glowed with new intelligence, a clarity and awareness that stunned everyone present. The creature's gaze swept across the assembled humans before settling once more on Lyra. A final series of sounds emerged, these so clear and structured that the translation system produced an immediate result. "Do not let us die in silence." With those words, Vorathar the Ruinclaw, the galaxy's most feared apex predator, exhaled a final breath and went still in Lyra Thorne's arms. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the continued beeping of the monitoring system confirming what everyone could see. Vorathar was gone. Lyra remained kneeling, her hands still resting on the creature's now cooling scales. Tears streaked her face inside the containment suit, an emotional response to a predator that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. "Specialist Thorne," Major Corrin said finally, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "You need to exit the containment area now." Lyra nodded numbly, carefully lowering Vorathar's massive head to the chamber floor before standing on shaky legs. As she stepped back through the field access, removing her containment suit with mechanical movements, her mind was already racing ahead. "We need to review all our protocols," she said, her voice stronger now, focused. "Every predator in this facility needs to be reassessed. If Vorathar could communicate, others can too." "This changes nothing," Vornik said, though his voice lacked conviction. "One anomalous case doesn't invalidate decades of research and security procedures." "With respect, Doctor, this changes everything," Lyra countered. "We've been treating sentient beings as mindless animals. We've been silencing voices that were trying to speak. The Galactic Union Security Council will never accept such a claim without substantial evidence," Vornix argued. "Then we'll gather that evidence," Lyra said firmly. "Starting with a complete analysis of Vorathar's vocalizations and a review of the mining incident that led to his capture." Professor Vega looked up from her equipment, her expression thoughtful. "There are old data records from the initial capture, raw neural scans that were never fully analyzed because they didn't fit the expected patterns. I could re-examine them with this new context." "Do it," Lyra nodded. Then, turning to Corrin, "Major, I need access to the other Level 9 specimens, under controlled conditions. Of course, but with reduced neural suppressants." Corrin looked uncertain. "That would require authorization from the facility director." "Then let's get it," Lyra said, a new determination in her voice. "Because I promised Vorathar I would listen, and I intend to keep that promise." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity, controversy, and revelation. News of what had happened in Vorathar's containment chamber spread throughout the facility, then to the Galactic Union headquarters, sparking intense debate about predator sentience and ethical containment. A delegation of Union officials arrived within a week, led by Commissioner Zera, a stern-faced bureaucrat whose reputation for by-the-book administration preceded him. "This facility operates under strict Galactic Union protocols, Specialist Thorne," Zera reminded her during their first meeting. "Protocols established after centuries of documented predator attacks on sentient populations." "Protocols based on incomplete understanding," Lyra countered. "We've been studying these creatures through the lens of our preconceptions, seeing only what we expected to see." Zera's expression remained skeptical, but he had authorized a limited investigation into Lyra's claims. Professor Vega had been granted access to the complete neural archives, while Lyra was permitted to attempt communication with 3 other Level 9 specimens under heavily controlled conditions. The results were mixed but promising. An Othrax storm serpent, long believed to be driven purely by electrical impulses, showed clear response patterns to specific stimuli. A pair of Krell hunters, whose synchronized hunting had been attributed to instinctive pack behavior, demonstrated what appeared to be a sophisticated silent communication system when their neural suppressants were reduced. Most compelling was the discovery Professor Vega made in the archives: footage from an incident on the ice planet Zers, where a diplomatic delegation had become trapped in a massive crevasse after a sudden quake. The rescue records noted that local predators had inexplicably led emergency responders to the location. What the official report omitted was that one of those predators had been a juvenile specimen of Vorathar species. "They were helpers, not hunters," Vega explained, presenting her findings to the assembled Union officials. "The neural patterns show clear intentionality, not opportunistic behavior, but deliberate assistance." "One incident doesn't establish a pattern," Zera argued, though with less certainty than before. "No, but it establishes possibility," Lyra replied. "A possibility we've been systematically ignoring because it didn't fit our narrative about apex predators." The debate continued for days, growing more heated as evidence accumulated. Some researchers remained skeptical, arguing that anthropomorphizing dangerous creatures risked public safety. Others began to see the ethical implications of what Lyra was suggesting, that they had been effectively imprisoning and silencing sentient beings for centuries. Through it all, Lyra continued her work with the facility's specimens, developing increasingly sophisticated communication techniques. She spent hours beside containment fields, listening, observing, responding to vocalizations and movements that had previously been dismissed as meaningless. 4 weeks after Vorathar's death, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Vornix, who had remained Lyra's most vocal critic despite the mounting evidence, requested her presence in his laboratory. "I've been re-examining neural suppressant effects at the cellular level," he said, without preamble as she entered. "Looking for any explanation other than the one you've proposed." Lyra waited silently as he called up a holographic display showing comparative brain scans. "This is a standard apex predator neural map, as documented in Union research for the past century," he explained, indicating the first image. "And this." He hesitated, then displayed a second scan. "This is Vorathar's neural activity in the moments after the control mask was removed." The difference was striking. Where the standard map showed relatively simple patterns focused in areas associated with hunting and survival, Vorathar's scan blazed with complex neural pathways throughout regions associated with higher cognition, language processing, and emotional response. "It's as if..." Vornix seemed to struggle with the words. "It's as if the neural suppressants weren't just controlling aggression. They were actively preventing certain neural pathways from forming, or rather, from being detected." "They were silencing them," Lyra said softly. "Just as Vorathar said." Vornix nodded reluctantly. "I've spent my career studying these creatures through a very specific lens. If what we're seeing is accurate, then..." He took a deep breath. "Then we've been wrong. Catastrophically wrong." The admission, coming from the facility's most respected and traditionally minded researcher, marked a turning point. When Vornix presented his findings to Commissioner Zira and the Union delegation the following day, the debate shifted from whether apex predators possessed sentience to how the Union should address its centuries of misguided policy. "We need time to verify these findings," Zira insisted, "to establish new protocols, new containment methods that balance safety with ethical treatment. With respect, Commissioner, what we need is to stop thinking in terms of containment altogether," Lyra argued. "These beings aren't specimens to be studied or threats to be neutralized. They're potential diplomatic partners." The suggestion was radical enough to send a ripple of shock through the assembled officials. But the evidence had become too compelling to dismiss. 2 months after Vorathar's final message, the Galactic Union Security Council issued a galaxy-wide moratorium on predator containment using neural suppressants. The Arcthera facility was ordered to transition from a control center to a research institute focused on interspecies communication. For Lyra, it was both a vindication and the beginning of a new challenge. As the newly appointed director of the Apex Being Communication Program, she faced the daunting task of establishing diplomatic relations with creatures that humans had hunted, captured, and silenced for centuries. "They won't trust us immediately," she acknowledged in her first address to the restructured research team. "Why should they? We've given them no reason to believe we'll listen now after ignoring them for so long." The transition wasn't smooth. Some specimens, freed from neural suppressants for the first time in years, exhibited the very aggression that had justified their containment. Others withdrew completely, refusing to engage with human researchers despite Lyra's best efforts. "We're asking for trust we haven't earned," she admitted to Professor Vega after a particularly frustrating session with a Draconis shadow stalker that had retreated to the furthest corner of its habitat, its neural patterns showing clear signs of distress, despite the absence of suppressants. "Trust takes time," Vega reminded her. And healing takes longer. These beings have experienced what amounts to torture for generations. We can't expect forgiveness overnight. Lyra nodded, though the weight of responsibility sometimes felt crushing. I promised Vorithar we would listen. But what if they no longer want to speak to us? The answer came 3 months into the program, from the most unexpected source. A juvenile Krell hunter, born in captivity and never exposed to its species' natural communication patterns, approached the habitat barrier where Lyra sat during her daily observation session. The creature, no more than half-grown but already formidable with its triple-jointed limbs and sensory ridge, produced a series of clicks and trills that the translation system identified as an approximation of Lyra's name. Yes, she responded, her heart racing. I'm Lyra, I'm listening. The Krell's response was simple but unmistakable. Teach me to speak. I want to tell stories. The request spread like wildfire through the facility, then across the Union's communication networks. A predator asking not for freedom or vengeance, but for the ability to share its narrative. It was a turning point that even the most skeptical officials couldn't ignore. 6 months after finding Vorithar cradled in Lyra's arms, the Arcthera facility completed its transformation. The sterile containment cells had been replaced with species-appropriate habitats. The neural suppressant systems had been dismantled, replaced with advanced translation technology designed to facilitate cross-species communication. Most significantly, the facility's purpose had shifted from control to collaboration. In the main corridor, where security checkpoints had once stood, a memorial had been erected. At its center was a lifelike hologram of Vorithar, the Ruinclaw, captured not in a pose of aggression, but in one of dignified repose. Beneath it, an inscription read simply, "He taught us to listen." On the day of the official rededication ceremony, officials from across the Galactic Union gathered in what had once been the Level 9 containment area, now transformed into an interspecies conference chamber. Representatives from a dozen worlds stood alongside researchers who had once dedicated their careers to predator control. Lyra, now known throughout the Union as the Voice of Beasts, took her place at the center of the chamber. Beside her stood Dr. Vornix, whose remarkable transformation from skeptic to advocate had earned him new respect among his peers. Today marks not an ending, but a beginning. Lyra addressed the assembled guests. For centuries, we've defined ourselves by what we fear, by the boundaries we establish between us and them. Today, we take the first step toward a different kind of understanding. She gestured toward the habitat access doors, which slid open to reveal something no one had witnessed before. Apex predators from 6 different species, entering the chamber without restraints or control mechanisms. The Krell hunter, who had first requested communication lessons, led the procession, its movements deliberate and dignified. A murmur of apprehension rippled through the human observers, but Lyra continued calmly. These beings have agreed to serve as the first diplomatic delegation of their kind. They come not as specimens or subjects, but as partners in what we hope will be a new era of interspecies cooperation. The Krell approached the central platform, where a specialized vocalization system had been installed. The translation of its message appeared on screens throughout the chamber. We have waited long to be heard. You silenced us because you feared our strength. Now let us show you our wisdom. Commissioner Zira stepped forward, visibly tense but committed to the moment's historical significance. On behalf of the Galactic Union, I extend formal recognition to the assembled Apex representatives. Your voices will be heard in our council chambers, your perspectives considered in our policies. It was a beginning, tentative, fraught with the weight of historical mistrust, but a beginning nonetheless. As the ceremony concluded and the various delegations began the delicate process of diplomatic interaction, Lyra found herself standing before Vorithar's memorial. We're listening now, she said softly to the holographic image. Just as you asked. Major Korhan appeared beside her, his security uniform replaced with the diplomatic corps insignia. "You changed everything," he said quietly. "One moment of compassion, and you rewrote centuries of policy." Lyra shook her head. "Not me. Vorithar did. All I did was listen when no one else would." "That's more than most of us managed," Korhan admitted. "I spent years guarding these beings, never once considering they might have something to say." "The past is past," Lyra replied. "What matters is what we do now." As if to emphasize her point, an alert chimed softly on her communication device. The Othric Storm Serpent, whose electrical communication had proven particularly challenging to translate, had successfully transmitted its first complete narrative, a complex history of its species' migration patterns across 3 star systems. "Another voice joins the conversation," she smiled, showing the alert to Korhan. "And to think, we almost missed hearing any of them," he mused. Lyra turned back to the memorial, to the image of the creature whose final message had started everything. "No more silence," she promised. "No more." In the years that followed, the program expanded beyond Arcthera to facilities across the Galactic Union. Apex Communication Specialists, a new field that Lyra had effectively created, became vital members of diplomatic missions to previously unexplored regions. The beings once classified simply as predators revealed complex social structures, historical narratives, and technological insights that transformed Union understanding of the galaxy itself. Lyra Thorne remained at the center of this revolution, though she consistently redirected credit to the true pioneers, the Apex beings themselves, who had maintained their ability to communicate despite centuries of suppression. Her formal title became Interspecies Communication Director, but throughout the Union, she was known by the name first given to her by the juvenile Krell, the voice of beasts. On the 10th anniversary of Vorithar's death, or transition, as the Apex beings preferred to call it, Lyra returned to the specific chamber where she had first cradled the dying Ruinclaw. The space had been preserved as a historical site, though the containment technology had long since been removed. As she stood in the empty chamber, remembering that pivotal moment, a soft vocalization from the doorway caught her attention. The Krell Hunter, now fully grown and serving as the primary translator for its species, entered the space with deliberate steps. "You remember," it transmitted through its communication device. "Every day," Lyra nodded. "We remember too. All species. Vorithar's sacrifice lives in our songs." The Krell approached, towering over Lyra, yet moving with careful grace. It extended one multi-jointed limb, offering a small, crystalline object that pulsed with inner light. "Memory crystal," the translation explained. "Contains Vorithar's clan history. Stories never told to humans. Until now." Lyra accepted the crystal with trembling hands, understanding the profound trust the gesture represented. "I'll make sure it's preserved, and that everyone hears these stories." The Krell made a sound that the translation system identified as the equivalent of solemn agreement. "Vorithar said you would listen. Now we all speak. Now we all hear." As Lyra left the chamber with the crystal, carefully stored in a preservation field, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a single moment of compassion. From one dying creature's final message had grown a movement that transformed galactic understanding of consciousness itself. The memorial to Vorithar had been expanded over the years, joined by tributes to other Apex beings whose wisdom had guided the evolving relationship between species. But the original inscription remained unchanged, its simple truth as powerful as the day it was first carved. "He taught us to listen." And across the vast expanse of the Galactic Union, countless voices, once silenced by fear and misunderstanding, now joined in a conversation that would continue for generations to come.